And good afternoon and welcome to Lambda Weekly. LaRon, could you close the door?
Okay.
We're in our new studio and we are really just trying to get used to it again. It's our old board, but some things have been shifted around, some things are not connected yet, but the phones are on.
The phone's on?
Yes, AT&T actually found us.
Oh my god.
You know, they had this big tornado response team that couldn't figure out how to get to KNON for months.
This is fantastic. I thought we wouldn't get phones for another maybe 12 weeks.
I know. I know. So who knew? But they were very good not to let us not have phones throughout the whole pledge drive.
Sure.
So
that was awesome.
So we're really enjoying being in our new studio. There is a speaker right outside the door, so we have to remember to close the door. So the little things are different. It is funny, and there's not as much room behind you for our studio audience. Our guests today are Scott Poggensee.
Poggensee.
I did it again.
It's okay. I always tell people it takes a 3-hour college class to learn how to say my name. So if you haven't graduated from that class yet. Then
Scott's been on with us before. We're talking about the Brandon Woodruff case for part of the hour. We have a couple of other things we're talking to him about. And he's here with C. Derick Miller, who is a writer of dark fiction.
Hi, how's it going? Hi, how's it going?
Good. Well, welcome. And he's known as Chad. That's what the C is for. So Chad, welcome.
Thank you.
We're kind of jumping in the middle of this, but some people don't know what we're talking about. Not everybody listens every week. Why don't you listen every week? But some people don't listen every week. So we're talking about the Brandon Woodruff case. Brandon was convicted of murdering his parents out in Hunt County?
Hunt County, Roy City, yeah.
Give us a little background on the story, because we're not going to do the whole thing over again. For people who have heard those shows, we've gone into it. You've shown a film that you made.
Not on the radio show.
No, we didn't show the film on the radio.
Just want to be clear.
It was at the Texas Theater.
It loses effect when you put it on the radio.
But give us a little background on what this case is and why it's important to the LGBT community.
Sure, absolutely. So basically, Dennis and Norma Woodruff were murdered in their Roy City home back in 2005, in October of 2005. The police very quickly honed in on their son, Brandon, and I believe they arrested him within 5 days of the bodies being discovered. And that's one of the things that I bring out in the documentary is like 78% of the investigation happened after Brandon was arrested. But there's a large contingent that believe that they got the wrong guy, and that there was not enough evidence to not only really, the way that his trial attorney said it was, there wasn't enough evidence to convict him in civil court with the preponderance of the evidence, let alone in criminal court with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So when I first started looking into the case and really started studying it for the documentary, I just kept looking through all of the evidence and kept thinking to myself, you know, eventually I'm going to find that thing or that gotcha moment, that one thing that's going to say, oh, okay, so this is why they arrested him, or this is why they convicted him, and I never found that. So
well, we did. He was at S4 later that night.
Right. Well, that was one of the things. So that was the major theory that the prosecution used throughout the trial, was basically just character assassination. And they brought up the fact that he was in the process of coming out, and that he was not being entirely forthcoming with some of the people in his life. You know, the church friends, school friends, people like that. He wasn't telling that he was gay. But then he had this whole other life where he was going to the S4 and he was going to other clubs and he was dancing and, you know, dancing with his shirt off and, you know, stuff like that. So
he killed his parents.
That's their theory.
Well, like Patti, when you went to Baylor, they weren't completely accepting, so you killed some people, right?
Right. I mean, because
that's what you do.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make that clear.
If every person that was coming out killed somebody, there'd be nobody left.
Another piece that has always hit me is we know that after that evening he went to Abilene, back to school, but the crime scene was cleaned up completely. Right. And it seems like it wasn't done that night.
Correct, and that's one of the things that we actually hired a crime scene reconstructionist that went through, and this is actually new. I don't think we've ever talked about this because it's happened since the last time I was on, but we hired this crime scene reconstructionist that went through and did experiments, because Ranger Collins, who is the lead investigator for the Texas Rangers, he noted in his investigative report that there was moisture on the sink and in the bathtub of the guest bathroom. So the crime scene reconstructionist went back and did...
And that's important because the bodies weren't found immediately.
Correct. They were supposedly, according to the prosecution, they were murdered Sunday night, and then they were found Wednesday afternoon. So what the reconstructionist did was he went through and did several different experiments. So he put water in the sink and in the bathtub, and he just saw, like, how long did it take for it to evaporate? How long did it take to evaporate with 80% humidity? How long did it take to evaporate with a 75-degree temperature, with a 65-degree temperature, with an 85-degree? Like, he went through and literally did dozens and dozens of experiments. And the longest that it took for that water to dissipate or to evaporate was 13 hours.
So that shows that within 13 hours of the bodies being found and police investigating this crime scene, which was later in the week, when were the bodies found?
It was
Tuesday?
Wednesday. Yeah.
That means somebody was had been
Somebody
there.
was there?
Somebody there was in 13 hours. When Ranger Collins made that notation, when he actually observed that, it was about 9 o'clock at night on Wednesday. So somebody had to have been in there Wednesday during the day, or possibly Tuesday night.
And then another big piece of this is the phone records. But Patti, did you want to ask?
Yeah, I was going to comment on that. If the murders had taken place on Sunday, and they weren't discovered until Wednesday.
You know what? Hold on a second. I need to back up. Everybody's probably yelling at me. They were discovered Tuesday. It wasn't until Wednesday when the investigation started.
Okay.
So Tuesday night they were discovered. I apologize.
Okay. So let's say it's even 24 hours. It means somebody went back.
Right.
Right. So somebody definitely had to be in that house Monday night.
Or never left.
And we know Brandon
Right,
was in
exactly.
Abilene
Right. And
during the week.
Right.
So Sunday night from about 10:30 on, he has an alibi all the way up until they discovered the bodies. I mean, he was with friends. He went back to school. He was at class. He was, he has an alibi for that whole time. So if we can show in court, and the judge believes it, that there was moisture in there, and that somebody had to have been in there Monday night, that would completely 100% without question exonerate Brandon.
One of the biggest things that stood out for me from watching the film is, and if you haven't seen it, I hope you get the chance to see it, and we'll talk about that.
We will.
But the initial investigation was done in the dark.
Yes. So
when you're watching a film, you're going, what?
Yeah,
They're doing it in the dark.
Ranger Collins decided that he wanted the jury to see the crime scene as they first saw it, which was at 9 o'clock at night, which it was dark. So they did not turn any lights on. They had basically a couple flashlights that they were shining around, and then
They do that on SCI, CSI, and on SUV or whatever it's called.
No,
never watched those shows.
I think even they turn the lights on.
Well, yeah, so everybody
but
that I've talked to.
flashlights at first because it's more mysterious.
On Columbo, they turn the lights on.
Yeah, they do it on Ghost Hunters too, and it's equally as believable.
Well, they do. So they usually just have flashlights when they're looking at the crime scene. By the time they go back and actually videotape it, they'll turn the lights on. In fact, several people that I've talked to, attorneys and investigators, they said they have never, ever, ever in their life seen a crime scene videotaped in the dark. And they were told that they were eventually going to turn on the lights and then go back and take it again, but apparently their batteries run out, so they couldn't do it.
They never did.
They never did.
That's a good reason.
Well, I mean, it's
Their
hard
batteries were out because they're not available.
They're not available at Walmart or anything like that.
Or anywhere
no.
in Hunt County.
Right. There's no batteries available in Hunt County.
All right, so from this experiment, they were able to determine that somebody had been back in the house within the past 13 hours of finding them.
Correct.
How were they able to determine that they were actually killed on Sunday and not Monday night or Tuesday morning or something?
Well, they actually were never able to forensically say when they were killed. The only reason that they believed that the investigators believed that, was because Dennis and Norma did not show up to work Monday morning. So they just figured, okay, well, they had to have been killed sometime Sunday night. But you're exactly right. They could have been held hostage. They could have, there's all kinds of stuff that could have happened.
Wait, doesn't a coroner determine time of death?
Once lividity, and now we're getting into the to the medical aspect. It's a good thing I'm an EMT. But once the lividity sets in, it's very difficult to determine time of death from that. Now, there are other things that you can do, and in fact, one of the things that we're investigating as well right now is the stomach contents and how long it was before they passed away after the last known time that they ate. So that's another thing. But there's several different ways. But yeah, the coroner on the stand in trial was not able to determine an exact time of death, or even really.
But what they did was they wrote the time of death to coincide with the 1 hour Brandon was free and could have committed the murder.
Exactly. I mean, and well, honestly, the coroner, the medical examiner said that they couldn't determine what it was. So with that being open, of course, that leaves it open for the prosecution to come in and say, oh, well, they didn't show up for work Monday morning, so they must have been killed Sunday. And the only person that we know of that had any kind of opportunity was Brandon the night before. And the biggest thing about that is, and this is one of the most frustrating things in the whole case, is the prosecutors knew, I can prove 100% that they knew that Brandon only was unaccounted for 14 minutes. They lied to the jury, and they told the jury that Brandon was unaccounted for an hour. In fact, in the process of the documentary, I talked to 3 different jurors, and I asked every single one of them, I said, if it was proven to you that Brandon only had 14 minutes to shoot both of his parents, stab both of his parents, go to the bathroom, take a shower, change clothes, put the murder weapons in the bag or some kind of place to leave them, clean up the bathroom. I mean, all this stuff that he would have had to have done. I asked them, I said, if it was proven to you that it was only 14 minutes, would you have changed your verdict? And every single one of them said yes. And
one other piece of evidence that's missing, phone records, because Brandon claims that during that time he had several phone calls. Even if he didn't, his phone would have been pinging off of cell towers. Mm-hmm. That he claims he was in their old house, family's old house in Heath, right, which is a good 20 minutes away? 23 minutes. Yeah. Okay. So approximately. So where are the phone records? Well, that's a really good question. We still don't know where they're at. You only ask the good questions, right? That's exactly another one of the most frustrating things, is that the whole time that Brandon was in jail and the whole time that he was talking to his attorneys about his defense was, go back and look at the phone records. You'll see that I was at the Heath house. I was taking care of the animals. I was doing all of this stuff. There's no way that I could have been in Royce City. So it took them a good 6 to 8 months to actually go back and get the phone records. But
wait, did they have to get them from AT&T?
No, that would have taken a couple years. But when they finally did get the phone records, they had all of Brandon's records for 90 days. And for that whole 90 days, they had every single call that he made and that he received and everything. However, there was about 13 hours missing on the day in question, the day that they believed that Dennis and Norma were murdered.
13 hours? We've heard that before.
13 hours. And they didn't pick back up until later on after their supposed window of murder. So why is it, and then what the defense was able to do was they were able to go back and actually piece together Brandon's timeline of the calls and stuff he made from other people's phone records. So like his girlfriend's phone records, his friend Robert, his friend, like all these people. And they were like, oh, Brandon called you at 9:41. So we know that, that call lasted for 3 minutes. But the problem was, because we didn't have Brandon's records of those phone calls, they were not able to determine
where he was
from the cell towers where he was. All they were able to determine was he was on the phone.
So in addition to that 15 minutes of time that he actually had free, he was also on the phone.
Yeah, and well, the 14 minutes was the part that we just couldn't get anyone else's phone records to corroborate that he made any calls. So there was 14 minutes where there were no calls. However, the problem with that is that if we had Brandon's phone records, we don't know that he didn't call somebody else that they didn't have the phone records for. You know, what if he called a friend somewhere else that he didn't even at school that they didn't know about? So they were only able to piece together the phone records from other people's calls.
So when you say the phone records are missing, are they missing because the whatever phone company he was using at the time did not provide? They said they can't find, which I don't understand that. They can't find that 13-hour gap, or they did provide it and they're keeping it sealed or something?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, Laurent.
I only asked $64,000 questions.
So David asked the good questions. You asked the $64,000 questions.
About the money.
Yeah, right. Well, basically, so the problem is that we don't know. We don't know if they were provided to the Texas Rangers, and the Texas Rangers just kind of conveniently lost them, because what we were able to prove is that the phone records that the investigators turned over to the defense and to the court were not the original records from the phone company. Basically, they received the phone records from the phone company, put them into Excel spreadsheet, and then printed off that Excel spreadsheet to turn over to the court. So the investigators were the authors of the file. You know how when you make a file, it says who the author is. So the authors were the investigators. So if the investigators just happened to go through and delete rows 28 through 44, nobody would ever know the difference. And that's very frustrating.
And that's not best evidence.
No, absolutely not.
Best evidence would be the phone records directly from
the raw
phone
records,
company, not the Rangers' interpretation of them.
We need to
Exactly.
take a break.
Typos,
We need to take a break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 KNON FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Laurent Landis and the late Patti Fink. Our guests are C. Derick Miller and Scott Poggensee. We're talking about the Brandon Woodruff case. You have a new podcast. We're going to talk about that in just a moment, and we'll be back right after this. And you're listening to KNON 89.3 FM. I'm Dave Taffet here with Laurent Landis and the late Patti Fink. We're trying to get real fancy technical here. Our record players are set up, but a couple of the other things that we needed to get something to run is not. Our guests are Scott Poggensee and C. Derick Miller. Chad, you're a writer.
That's correct.
How did you get involved with this character?
Well, I was doing some freelance journalism for the Greenville Herald-Banner, which is in Hunt County, and I was covering Scott's film at the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff. And it just so happens that Brandon's attorney and my attorney and personal friends are the same person. So she introduced us, we got to talking, and we've been staying in contact ever since. And now we're working together. So.
And what are you working on? Because you have a new project.
Well, we have the American Justice podcast that's coming out, and the entire first season is about Brandon's case. So we're diving really deep into that. Lots of documents, lots of interviews, lots of video, and I think we have 5 episodes complete, and we're just scratching the surface of this thing. This could go on for a very long time.
So you're going in more detail than what the film does.
Yes, going into a lot more detail than what the film does.
And I'm sure that part of that information wasn't even available to you or known to you.
No,
until after the film was completed.
It seems like just speaking with Scott week to week when we work together, he always has something new to tell me about this case. And I mean, this case began, in 2005? Mm-hmm. He was convicted in 2009, and there's still new evidence, new things coming to light all the time, but it's done. And the hard part is getting someone else to care.
And basically, it came down to he was convicted because he was a gay kid in Hunt County.
Right.
That's the way I see it as well.
Scott, how are you coming? You're booting. Okay.
Wait, I'm booting up.
Okay. Now, what you're working on is a podcast. It's called American Justice.
Yes.
Where can people find it?
Right now, they
Justice
can't find it
podcast.
anywhere.
Dropped it yet.
We haven't dropped it yet. The first episode will be available March 1st, Sunday, so a week from today.
And they can find it.
Scott, where else is it going to be?
AmericanJusticePodcast.com.
Did I say that correctly? AmericanJusticePodcast.com. And I'm sure from there will be...
There'll be links to where you can get to it.
It'll
Okay.
be distributed.
Okay, now what we have is a clip from your podcast, and if we can get the computer booted and then bring the thumb drive up. This is very technical for KNON. They should have brought it on a vinyl record. We could have played it.
Or an 8-track.
My bad.
Or an 8-track. An 8-track. You know.
Well, while they're getting that booted up, Chad, you kind of have somewhat of a personal connection to this story.
I actually do.
Tell us about that.
From the year 2004 until the year 2013, I actually worked for the Hunt County Sheriff's Department, and I was there when Brandon was arrested and brought in, and over the years continued to interact with him on an almost daily basis as a classification officer. Mm-hmm. So I knew the incarcerated Brandon, and of all the inmates that I interacted with on a daily basis working there, and that's thousands, because the Hunt County Jail can hold, I believe, like 372 inmates, and they move them in and out of there all the time. Of those thousands of inmates I dealt with on a regular basis, I honestly believe that deep down in my heart, just from the way he spoke, I mean, we never discussed his case or details, or he never came out to me and flat out said, I didn't kill my parents.
Right.
Our conversations were more civil, more day to day, and just watch his body language, the way he spoke, how intelligent he was, his mannerisms. He was probably the only inmate in all that time I worked for the Hunt County Jail that I could just think on everything he was saying and say, this kid is not guilty. This kid didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And he's the only one I can say that about. And it was just strange, because after he was convicted and sent to the penitentiary, I worked there for a few more years. I was in an administrative capacity after that.
Not, but it's ringing.
And I really didn't think about him much. I kind of wondered what all went down. I'm not even sure if I knew the details of his conviction at that point, because I had moved away from the jail
Just
and
hit
up
play.
into the actual sheriff's department.
You want to stay here?
And I didn't think about it again until I was asked to cover Scott's film.
Wow.
Okay,
So I-
if this is going to work, we have the podcast ready. It's about a 3-minute clip.
Yeah.
About a 3-minute clip. Let's see if it works, and then we'll have something to talk about it. Go ahead.
Royce City, Texas. To most, this place is simply a convenient stop for fuel or refreshments when traveling Interstate 30. In the fall of 2005, it was the typical shadow of small-town America.
Did you kill your parents?
Nope.
Two of its residents, Dennis and Norma Woodruff, were going about their normal lives, getting ready for bed and work the next morning. Little did they know, this would be the night their lives would end.
In a jailhouse interview, Brandon Woodruff denied stabbing and shooting his parents in the neck and face.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the American Justice Podcast. My name is Scott Poggensee, and I'll be your guide as we navigate through the ins and outs.
I'm in here for something I didn't do. I've got to stick up for myself now. If you know what I'm saying? I mean, I can't. I mean, this is I've never been used to this at all.
Twists and turns,
Having to be in cuffs, sitting here talking to you. This is crazy.
and a series of odd events that would eventually lead Brandon Woodruff to the sentence of life in prison without parole.
The murders took place in this Royce City mobile home in mid-October. Investigators say there were no signs of a struggle, and it appeared the victims knew their attacker.
If I believed that there was even a 1% chance that Brandon was guilty, I wouldn't be here.
We always had a good relationship. If I had a problem, they were there to answer it. I mean, I had everything.
As you'll see throughout this podcast, the facts to bring about Brandon's exoneration exist in black and white already.
How did they know what they may or may not have been contaminating, destroying, messing up to film a crime scene in the dark with no lights on. I mean, that to me was just stupid.
All I did was look over and study the evidence from a non-biased point of view. It's unfortunate, but it's the very same evidence that was penned by those same badges society insists that we trust.
The Hunt County DA says the evidence will speak for itself.
He's certainly entitled to his opinion, but we'll decide, the jury's going to decide that when we have a trial.
Now, be rest assured, I'm not the only one that believes in Brandon's innocence. There does exist a large group of people who believe in Brandon. However, those who seek comfort with the trust and abilities of their local law enforcement officials are satisfied with the decision of guilt.
My name is Brandon Woodruff. I'm 31 years old. I was arrested for capital murder in the deaths of my parents, Norma and Dennis Woodruff, and I did not commit this crime.
That's powerful.
Dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun.
Yeah.
So
I will say,
enticing
though,
to
I,
listen.
I do want to point out, though, that there are two television networks that are working on documentaries about this case.
Correct.
But it was after you were on Lambda Weekly.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So they obviously heard me. Yeah. Okay. We'll just assume that they heard me on here.
But one is a cable network, and you can't name them right now.
I can't name them right now because all the contracts and stuff haven't been signed. But I can tell you that they are down here at Brandon's prison already. They arrived today. They'll be interviewing him on Tuesday. They'll be coming up to Dallas and interviewing a few select people this coming week. That's the cable network. The broadcast network, I'm having a meeting with the producer this coming week as well to work out all the logistics. Her exact words to me were, we are excited to be covering Brandon's case. Mm-hmm. So I really feel like they're going to, and both of the producers have watched the documentary. They've asked me, we've had extensive conversations. They know almost everything there is to know about this case, so they're thoroughly convinced of Brandon's innocence as well.
I hear the term American justice, and I think Bill Curtis. But Bill Curtis won't be on your podcast.
I don't believe. Is he still alive?
That's a great question.
Maybe you can investigate.
I can investigate and find out. That would be awesome That would be awesome if he is still alive and I can get him to say, "This is American justice."
So you all said first season. So you plan on after things wrapped up with Brandon's case, in terms of covering it, maybe the second season you'll start on another case?
Yeah, investigating Brandon's case has really gotten me interested in just wrongful convictions in general. Doing the research and finding out that there's been over 22,000 years lost due to wrongful convictions. It's one of those things that I feel very passionate about. I really want to highlight stories of other cases where we investigate and we feel like the person's innocent. You got to also understand that when someone's in prison, they don't have a voice. They don't have a way to get out there and call networks and make documentaries and all this stuff. So they need somebody that can be their voice in the outside world, and it's just something that I'm really starting to become pretty passionate about.
Hey, have you thought about maybe setting up some sort of intern program so that you get some staff who could, assist not only in the production of the podcast, but in investigations and
Well, we actually do already have a team as far as the podcast. So I do the narrations, I record them, and then I send it to a producer. The producer puts in all the cool music that you heard and all the clips and mixes them all together. Of course, we have Chad and I, writing it together. So for the podcast, we definitely have enough people to take care of that. But for the documentary, that's pretty much just a two-man crew here. So Yeah, that would be awesome to be able to find somebody that would like to join us and help out. Absolutely.
Now, because you have nothing else to do, actually, Scott does have a full-time job. You work full-time too, don't you?
I do.
Chad? Yeah.
Those pesky day jobs really get in the way.
They really do.
They certainly
So,
do.
Chad, you're helping to write another film that Scott, you're going to produce.
Yes, we're currently working on a film titled Warning Signs. This was a passion project of Scott's that he brought me in on, and I guess my history with writing mostly deals with dark fiction and horror, and the subject matter of this film, a lot of people say, well, this is a little bit outside of what you do. No, this is exactly what I do. The subject matter is horrific, but it's realistic. Teen suicide and bullying is a horrible problem, and not just in this country, but in the world right now. So this film is going to be informative and hopefully, well, educational and teach some people some things.
So this started, Scott, you work over at, can I say Children's Hospital?
Yeah.
Okay, you work over at Children's Hospital.
No, you can't say it, David.
Okay, so you work at a hospital on Harry Hines Boulevard.
That has to do with pediatric patients, yeah.
To do with care of younger people.
It has a world-class gender clinic.
Aww.
Yeah, they do.
Yes.
One of only 3 in the country right now.
Oh, the hospital leads the way right now when it comes to pediatric research of all different diseases.
So one of the things that you've run into while you're there, because you're an EMT.
I'm an EMT.
So you're seeing people as they're being brought into the hospital, or if something happens.
Yeah, we coordinate all the transfers between other hospitals, or so when somebody wants to send us a pediatric patient because they can't handle it for whatever reason, we coordinate that transfer. And what I've been able to, or what I've seen over the past 5 years that I've been there is, the age of these kids that are coming in that are committing suicide or attempted suicide or just depressed that need to be sent out for psychiatric evaluation, all of that, the age is getting younger and younger and younger. And what I'm noticing is, it just never ceases to amaze me these days when then the next coordination that I could do would be a 6-year-old that attempted suicide. And it's just really, it just really started to weigh on me, and I just really try to sit there and think, like, what can I do to make a difference? And the only thing I could really come up with was to make a narrative film. It's going to be a short film. It's going to be under 40 minutes, but it's going to be something that we hope entertains people, and as narrative fiction films do. But we hope that we also give people, parents, teachers, peers of these kids that are exhibiting these warning signs, we give them some tools to help these kids. And one of the things that in doing the research is the LGBT community is twice as likely to attempt suicide as their straight peers.
That's really the LGB community. The T community is something like 4 or 5 times more.
Yeah, you're right. That's even more. So. And here's the thing also, and this is one of the stats that we bring up in the promo that we did that's available on warningsignsfilm.com, is LGBT kids that come from families that are not accepting of their lifestyle are 8.4 times more likely to attempt suicide. And that's just a statistic that when I saw, I couldn't live with. I felt like I had to do something.
When you hear about youth suicide, I think most people think about 15, 16, 17-year-olds.
Right.
So when you hear about kids as young as 6, 7 or 8, even attempting suicide, that's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I see it every day. And it's not one of those things that it just rarely happens. I mean, pay attention to your Facebook feed. How many times do you see those stories of those kids that, committed suicide because they were gay and they were like 10 years old? Like it's just mind-boggling how bad it's getting. Because I was talking to somebody the other day and they were saying, I feel like this like the generations are getting better. Like I feel like we're more accepting of different lifestyles and stuff like that. And I said, yeah, but why are the statistics getting worse? You know, so there doesn't seem to be a correlation there between being bullied and acceptance. You know, it's like one of those things like, yeah, I don't care if you're gay, but I'm still going to bully you. You know.
We need to take a break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 KNON FM. Scott Poggensee and C. Derick Miller are our guests. We'll have more with them right after this. And welcome back to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with LaRon Landis and the late Patti Fink. And our guests are Scott Poggensee and C. Derick Miller. They are making a short film on bullying. So we were just talking a little bit about what inspired it. And LaRon, you said, you know, I understand it more from a 16-year-old.
From a 16-year-old, because, I mean, not to cheapen or anything what these little kids are feeling, obviously is strong enough to where they want to commit suicide, but when you first hear it, you're like, what in the world could be so bad for a 6-year-old to want to take their lives, or even know that they could take their lives? We typically hear about that from 15, 16-year-olds, but apparently it's more common than what I even thought.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the hard things for me to accept is that it is getting younger and younger and younger, and you know, like I said, I see it all the time, and there's just no way to really explain how someone that young, like you said, can even have that word in their vocabulary. You know, when I was 6 years old, I was not thinking about anything like that. I was thinking about, you know, going out and playing with my friends and stuff like that. So,
but I don't even know if I knew, like you said, I don't even know if I knew the word suicide,
right,
or that I could take my life when I was 6 years old.
Well, I read an article recently about a real emerging sector of young people who are attempting and succeeding at suicide, and that's young black boys from ages 5 to 12. And I was just floored. Yeah. I had to get up and walk around before I finished reading the article because I was so it upset me so much inside to think about these kids that would just turn to that at such a young age.
Yeah.
What method are they even using? I mean, they're not necessarily going to have access to pills and maybe guns.
Some of the stories that I have come across on the internet have been from hanging.
Yeah, hanging is probably the number one.
For a 6-year-old?
For young people, because they don't want anyone to know, right? So they do it in the privacy of their own bedroom or closet or whatever. And so that's the problem, is that when it's things, you know, there's so many stories of parents that are like, you know, we went to bed, everything was fine. I woke up the next morning, I called Billy down for school and he didn't answer. Went upstairs and found him hanging in his closet, you know, so there's just stuff like that. But I think also one thing that needs to be pointed out is that the schools at this point need to start taking more of a responsibility, because the number one reason that that these kids that are not wanting to go to school and all this stuff, or that they're depressed and suicidal, is they're saying that they don't want to go to school because they're being bullied, and they tell the teacher and the teacher doesn't do anything about it, or they tell the principal, they tell the counselor, you know, and then they tell their parents, and the parents don't really know what to do. And that's the reason that we're making the film, is that most people, they know, they can see the warning signs, but they just don't know what to do about it. And there's an old saying that says, confused people do nothing. And that's exactly what happens, is they're confused, they don't know how to help, they don't know how to get the child help. So they just end up chalking it up to, well, he's a kid, you know, he's going through changes, he's going through a phase, he's going through whatever.
He'll grow out of it.
He'll grow out of it. And the problem is, and one of the things that the film's going to address is, when you see the signs, when you see the warning signs even start, that's the time to intervene. That's the time to start getting them help, not when it's too late.
What are some of the warning signs?
There's several warning signs that we're going to be showing in the film. The first one is the regression in grades in school. You know, so you may have a child that's great in school, gets A's and B's all the time, and the next thing you know, they're getting C's and they're getting D's and they're starting to fail some classes. The other thing is they become very introverted. You know, you may have a kid that's like our character is going to be a singer and a dancer, and he's going to be very outgoing. And then the next thing you know, all of a sudden he doesn't want to come out of his room. He doesn't want to go play with his friends. He doesn't want to, there's also a change in dress and cleanliness, if you want to say hygiene. So they'll start not taking showers, and they'll start dressing all black, and just like not changing their clothes for days. I mean, there's several things that we're going to show
so
in the
Patti
film.
and Laurent are both dressed in black. I guess I am too.
And you too.
So is Scott.
So
we're all.
So Chad's the only one that's not depressed.
Yeah,
here.
I went cheerful. I went victory green today. Go Stars. So
okay, so Chad, one of the things that you said when you were talking about the film is that it's going to be entertaining. None of what we're talking about now is entertaining
right.
in the least.
Well, it's going to be entertaining because nobody wants to watch anything that's preachy. And Scott and I have had this discussion over and over again. We don't want to come off as preachy. We want this to be entertaining. We want there to be a story. But we also want people. This is going to be tough. We're going to try and get people to learn things at the same time. So
don't get us wrong. It's not going to be a comedy.
No, it will not be a comedy.
Well, it's not going to be a comedy, but there's a very fine line between helping someone and preaching to someone, and we don't want to be the type of film that just goes after you need to do this and you need to do this, and if you don't do this, you're a piece of crap. None of that. It's going to be, here's the story of Billy, here's what he went through, here's how they got him help, and here's how, so through watching that story, hopefully people will be able to recognize, my kid has that warning sign, or my kid has started to exhibit some of these. Maybe I need to have a conversation with them, and we'll show the conversation between him and his parents, and how that conversation may go, and give them kind of some examples on how to talk to their kids.
So I guess one of the goals then would be everyone who sees this film walks away and they know the warning signs to look for.
Absolutely.
Like it's been presented enough to them in the film that they really know.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't have sat through a 39-minute film.
Exactly.
And not come away with knowing what to look for.
Right, exactly, and that's the other thing that the task at hand for Chad is, being the head writer, is he's going to have to find a way to make this film not only educational, but to keep the audience glued to the film, to the screen. You got to make it interesting. You got to make it engaging. Yeah, absolutely. So. So that's one of those. Nobody wants to just sit there and like you said, watch a film that's they're just giving out statistics and stuff like that. So
nobody wants a PowerPoint read to them.
Right, exactly, exactly. So that'll be the probably the biggest challenge that we have in this film. But Chad's such a good writer that I have every faith in him.
Okay, so Chad, do you have some ideas on how you make this not gruesome?
Well, there are parts of it that will be a little gruesome.
Sometimes it might need to be a little gruesome.
Well, and that's one of the things that that we had a conversation on very, very early on, was we have to make this realistic. Bullies don't come in and just kind of flick you in the back of the head and then they're done. There's language that these bullies use. There's physical things that these bullies use. There's this intimidation through their words that they use. So all of that is we're going to do our best to be very realistic. Again, another one of those fine lines between how do you be realistic and then not be like a NC-17 film that you're putting out there. So that's a very fine line as well, but we're prepared for it. We do want to be very realistic. In fact, the promo spot that we put out, it's just the beginning. It shows Billy being punched in the gut, but that's just something that's just the beginning. That's not where this bullying ends. Kids don't not want to go to school because they got punched in the gut one time. they don't want to go to school because it's a constant berating and a constant, physical and emotional abuse that they're going through from these bullies. And unfortunately, from my research, the school districts, the parents, the teachers, the peers, they're not doing enough to help these kids.
So I'm sure everyone has seen this week, a story has gone viral from a little boy down in Australia who's a dwarf.
Yes.
Who's
So
bullied,
heartbreaking.
9 years old. It's gone viral. A lot of celebrities have reached out for him, raised money for him. I think they're sending him to Disney World, and now he got to walk out with one of the Australian soccer teams. So he's got a lot of support. But in part of this has come a wave of second wave of bullying, because now people are questioning, is he really 9 years old? And he is. His mother has provided all kinds of stuff to prove that he really is 9 years old. The rumor came out that he's 18. So, but it's just like, the bullying just doesn't stop.
Right.
So you need constant support. And thankfully, this little boy is getting it.
Yeah, and that's exactly the kind of story that I kept seeing over and over and over. And when you watch that video, I'm sure most people here listening have watched it, you just feel so bad for this kid. He's genuinely crying and distraught. And it's just one of those things that you feel so bad. It's like, we got to do something. I think the GoFundMe that they had, the original goal was $10,000 to send him to Disneyland, and I think they're over 400,000 now. So it's like,
it's up there. Yeah.
It's really crazy. But that's also, it's one of the things with this film as well. Like, I'm a full-time EMT that works, for an hourly job. So I'm not a millionaire. I can't just go out there and fund this myself. So that's the reason that we made this promo spot, is hopefully people will log on, kind of see what we're doing, and chip in $5, $10, $20, whatever they can to help. Our goal is $75,000 to get this film made.
And just an aside, so in EMT school is where you started doing filmmaking, because that's one of the requirements?
One of the requirements for the medical field. No, it was really, it's funny because with Brandon's case, there's tens and tens and tens of thousands of documents. And in having conversations with Brandon, I told him, Brandon, there's no way that most people are going to research this case like I did. They're not going to go through all these 10,000s of pages and all these, hundreds of hours of video that were available. So you really need somebody to sum up your story. You need a voice, you need a documentary. And so I started looking at what people charge to make a documentary, and it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I just thought to myself, I've got a camera, I've got a microphone, I've got a computer, like, why don't I just try it myself? And it was through that process of making that documentary that it seems like my passion for filmmaking is emerging.
And I have to say, the film does not look like something of a novice filmmaker. It's pretty good.
I appreciate that. I definitely had some good help with that. I have a professional editor that's helping and stuff like that. But yeah, and we're actually, I didn't mention this earlier, it's also, Brandon's story is one of those things where there's no way that I could sum it up in a 1 hour documentary, or even really a 2 hour documentary. So we are turning it into like a 5-part docuseries, like you would see on Netflix or whatever, and hopefully we can get the ear of Netflix to take a look at it, because the biggest thing for me is just getting his story out there. Like if Netflix came to me today and said, hey, we want all your footage, we want everything, and we're not going to give you a dime, I'd be like, how do I get it to you? Because I just want his story to be out there. I want Brandon to be out of prison, because he's been there for almost 15 years now. And,
How long has he sentenced for?
Life without parole. He'll never get out until we get the public behind him, we get the public to support him, and then they ultimately file a legal, it's called a writ of habeas corpus, or a writ of actual innocence. But once they file that, that's the last shot. If that doesn't work, he'll die in prison.
Because it has been appealed twice, and we talked about this the last time you were on. It was appealed twice, once to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, and then there was the separate appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Both of those were turned down.
Yeah, they both actually refused to even hear the appeal.
And that's what I mean by turned down for a hearing even.
Right,
so.
Exactly.
So my immediate thought is, vote.
Absolutely.
And speaking
Yeah.
of voting, voting is underway right now in early voting in both the Democratic and Republican primaries. But one way to, for example, in Texas, all of those courts are elected judges.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can make a difference by electing somebody different.
Absolutely. And one of the great things that's come out of all of this is some of the key people that have supported Brandon. And one of the people is State Representative Richard Raymond. Have to give him a shout out because he has taken the time to learn all of the information about Brandon's case. When I had my screening down in Austin, he actually came and attended the screening. And he's absolutely, anytime I need anything, he's always like, update me on what's going on with Brandon's case. So he's been a huge supporter. And so yeah, the more people that we get that are more high profile, that can get other people, and I always tell Brandon this, say, look at it this way. Let's say you file the writ and you file it in, it's gonna have to be filed in Hunt County. And so you file it and there's nobody in the courtroom. There's nobody that knows about your case. There's nobody that supports you. That judge can just be like, you know what? I'm not going to approve it. I'm just going to sweep it under the rug.
Sure, he was convicted and life
they
without
must-
parole. Why should I
even look at it?
He has
really?
nothing else to do, so he's in the jailhouse library and just figuring out ways to waste our time.
Right.
And that's generally what they would think.
Right. And then I told him, I said, look at the exact opposite. What happens if that courtroom is so full that they can't even hold the amount of people? What if there's 1,000 people standing outside of the courtroom? What if there's, these major networks that are doing stories and you have millions of supporters all across the country? That judge is not going to be able to just sweep it under the rug. It's going to have so much media attention that he's going to have to, even if he does deny it, he's going to have some really good reasons, because I can't go into them all right now, but we have some really good reasons that he's innocent and that we're going to present that if the judge says no, I mean, it's literally going to be, he didn't look at it, he didn't consider
and at the beginning of the show,
Witnesses. That's what it's
Right.
doing.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the show, the first portion of the show, we were talking about some of those reasons, but we boiled it down to 3 basic reasons.
Right. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
There's a ton more.
There's a ton more.
Right. We're going to keep going. I don't see the next show here yet.
I just wanted to, for our listeners, Bill Curtis is still alive.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe I'll have to contact him. And
Yeah.
see. That was not my inspiration in naming the podcast, but now that it's
He's got
now that it's out there.
That deep voice. He
Oh,
could,
yeah.
He could really go, and people go, I know that voice.
I love Bill Curtis. Yeah, he's awesome.
And if you're a true crime buff like me,
Uh-huh. Yeah, me
Erin's
too.
always afraid. She says, my wife here, and she's like, if she ever really pissed me off, she said, I'm scared of all the ways you know.
Yeah.
Because I watch all these shows.
Yeah,
But,
a lot of people say that these true crime shows are just like instructional videos.
Pretty much.
And mostly on being stupid.
Right. Yeah, don't be stupid.
We're going to take our top of the hour break.